Imagine this, you're a type A overachiever. You've spent years, maybe a decade, climbing toward the summit. And the moment you finally grasp it, your brain screams, danger, and you burn it all to the ground. Why do high achievers secretly fear success? The answer lies in a neurological trap called the arrival fallacy, and once you see it, you'll never look at ambition the same way again. Right now, in elite boardrooms, labs, and studios, there are brilliant people feeling a rising tide of panic as their dreams come true. Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck's 2006 study revealed that individuals praised for being geniuses were 40% more likely to lie about their scores. They'd rather commit fraud than lose the label. This isn't weakness, it's a self-defeating pattern hardwired into our reward circuitry. The very system that drives you to achieve is the same system that can manufacture a crisis the moment you arrive. Meet David, a tech founder who spent 7 years building a revolutionary platform. When a $100 million acquisition offer landed on his desk, he didn't celebrate. He became belligerent. He torpedoed the deal with erratic behavior, burning bridges, insulting the buyers. What on earth could drive someone to destroy their life's work at the moment it's about to pay off? The answer isn't in his character, it's in his brain's default mode network. Harvard neuroscientist Dr. Srinivas Pillai discovered that during goal completion, the default mode network goes into overdrive. This is the part of your brain that generates self-referential thoughts. Do I deserve this? What if they find out I'm a fraud? It floods you with questions that feel like an existential audit. And when that inner noise becomes unbearable, the brain seeks a reset, often through self-destruction, just to return to a familiar neural baseline of struggle. But David's deeper battle wasn't just with his own thoughts. During a later fMRI analysis, researchers found that his brain had been unconsciously protecting him from a threat far older than the modern world, the fear of his own father's envy. Somewhere beneath his awareness, success meant surpassing his role model, risking a primal severance from his primary attachment figure. The Jonah complex isn't poetry, it's a measurable cortisol spike that treats greatness like a predator. Psychoanalyst Abraham Maslow coined the term Jonah complex after observing that his most brilliant patients would ruin their careers right after monumental breakthroughs. His forgotten insight is now backed by fMRI. Anticipating a major personal success activates the same anterior insula and amygdala as anticipating physical pain or social rejection. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a promotion and a home invasion. That's not a metaphor, it's neurobiology. Why does this happen? Because we are wired for pursuit, not possession. The neurotransmitter dopamine, your brain's rocket fuel, is released not when you get the reward, but when you anticipate it. Once you achieve the goal, the dopamine tap screeches to a halt, and you're left in a neurochemical vacuum. Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy. You think reaching the peak will fulfill you, but your brain experiences it as an existential void. So what does it do? It creates a new problem just to feel alive again. A 2014 study in psychological science found that people experience a 22% drop in motivation immediately after being recognized as expert in a field. The brain perceives the status change as a threat to its underdog narrative, the dopamine-dependent story of striving. You become hooked on the chase, not the kill. And when the chase ends, you feel lost. So you subconsciously manufacture a setback, a conflict, a health crisis, a self-destructive choice, to restart the engine. So the high achiever's relationship with success becomes a tragic pattern: achieve, crash, sabotage, repeat. Dr. Gay Hendricks calls this the upper limit problem. It's as if you have an internal thermostat for how much joy or success you're allowed to experience. If your temperature rises above that set point, say, a certain income, a certain level of recognition, your brain triggers a self-sabotage mechanism: procrastination, sudden illness, relationship explosions. Anything to bring you back to the familiar temperature of struggle. Where does that upper limit come from? Often, it's imprinted in childhood. A 2021 longitudinal study found that individuals high in perfectionistic self-presentation were 67% more likely to sabotage a successful relationship or career milestone. And underneath that perfectionism, messages like, "Don't get too big for your britches," or, "Who do you think you are?" These aren't just words, they become neural encodings in the limbic system, an invisible glass ceiling you carry in your skull. This is the shadow of the idealized self. High achievers often construct a persona, successful me, as a defense against deep-seated feelings of inadequacy. When the dream is achieved, that persona has served its purpose and the raw, vulnerable self is exposed. And that exposure feels like death. So the brain orchestrates a dramatic fall. If you can't handle the emptiness thriving, you'll fill it with chaos. Better to be a tragic hero than a terrified imposter. And then there's the evolutionary trap. Our brains were shaped for small tribal living. Succeeding beyond your social group, outperforming your peers, can trigger an ancient fear of banishment. A 2010 meta-analysis found that fear of success is especially potent when success would differentiate you from your group. Your Stone Age brain interprets being too good as a threat of exile, and so you subconsciously clip your own wings to remain part of the tribe. The same brain that helped you survive the savannah now sinks your IPO. Neuroendocrinology adds another layer. High achievers often have high testosterone, drive, dominance, but also elevated cortisol from chronic stress. Stanford research shows this mix is neurotoxic. It impairs the prefrontal cortex, your brain's CEO, leaving you vulnerable to impulsive, destructive decisions precisely when you need wisdom most. Your brain, flooded with this cocktail, starts shutting down rational oversight. Suddenly, the crazy idea, insult the buyer, start an affair, quit right before the bonus, seems like the only way to escape the pressure. And then there's joy. Dr. Breen Brown's research on over 1,000 executives uncovered foreboding joy, the secret belief that if you let yourself feel too good, disaster will strike. This isn't superstition, it's your brain's predictive coding trying to keep you safe. If extreme happiness reliably precedes a crash in your early life, your brain builds a model that says, happiness equals danger. So when life is going too well, you become anxious, and that anxiety drives you to preempt the expected crash by creating a controlled one. Better to sabotage yourself than be blindsided. In 2019, Nature Communications identified the habenula, often called the brain's anti-reward center. When expected rewards don't bring anticipated happiness, the habenula activates and shuts down motivation globally. This explains why millionaires often feel hollow. They expected fulfillment and got nothing. So what do? They self-sabotage, reckless investments, affairs, scandals, just to feel something again. They swap success for the thrill of chaos because their habenula punished them for arriving. So we have a perfect storm, a dopamine crash, an amygdala hijack, a DMN interrogation, a habenula shutdown, and a fear of exile, all converging at the moment of triumph. And the tragedy is, high achievers are praised for their grit. But when does grit become pathological? Angela Duckworth's framework was never meant to be a treadmill without an exit. When your brain cannot identify a healthy endpoint, success becomes an infinite loop of struggle that must be destroyed to escape. You're not afraid of failure, you're afraid of the void that comes when the battle is over. This is exactly what happened to Nobel laureate Richard Feynman. After winning physics' highest honor, he fell into a creative block so severe he thought his best work was behind him. He had become the genius, the label, the identity, and his brain rebelled. He had to crawl out of that void by giving himself permission to be an amateur again, to play without the pressure of proving. His story is the Jonah complex in Technicolor, the terror of losing one's outsider identity once you've become the establishment.